case, I had the Insta360 X5 now for a while. There is so much to like about this camera. However, there's, to me, one major downside, and that is the image it delivers is just too processed. So that's why I picked up this camera, and that's the DJI Osmo 360, and I want to compare those two cameras. I want to go out in the field and do real-life tests and see which of the cameras provide the most pleasing image. So let's find out. So this is the first test, the main test. So this is vlogging mode. So which of the images do you think looks the most pleasing? So pleasing, I would say, is a very general term. What you can categorize this as is level of detail, not just in my face, but also for the background and the surroundings. So when we are punching in, we can clearly see that the Osmo shows more details in definition, but we can also notice a degree of chromatic aberration, which is visible as those purple lines around the tree branches and other high contrast edges. I think it also shows signs of over-sharpening despite the in-camera setting is set to the lowest of -2. Also, looking at my jacket, it's quite apparent that the Osmo produces more image noise, whilst the X5 has a bit more aggressive noise removal, which makes the image perhaps a bit more mushy. With this kind of yellowish, yellow tone colors, I suspect that looks very artificial on the X5. For the Insta360, I don't know yet. So in my opinion, the Osmo image looks a bit more realistic than X5, and there is a bit more room for color grading in post for Osmo due to the 10-bit colors. This view is just insane. And this is scenic surroundings. In these static shots, I try to match a reframing between the two cameras, and I'm zooming in more and more. We can again see a bit more definition, but also more noise for the Osmo. If you want the cleanest image possible, I'd listen to Philip Bloom's advice, which is using a professional denoiser in post like Neat Video. You can also experiment with a bit more in-camera denoising on the Osmo, but I suspect it will result in a more mushy image than using Neat Video. I'm testing both cameras now in single lens mode in a fashion that I would prefer to use for vlogging. So I'm testing both cameras now in single lens mode in a fashion that I would prefer to use for vlogging. In single lens mode, I think the differences are greater than for the 360 shots, where the X5 image has tons of noise and is actually mushy at the same time. For the Osmo, the color fringing and the over-sharpened appearance of the image seems to be stronger than in 360 mode. Still, I think the Osmo shows more clarity and less artificial colors, like the orange and yellow colors in the snow. X5 looks a tad more cartoonish for me, so in my opinion, the Osmo is the clear winner here. You might wonder why I bother about single lens usage for this kind of camera, and the answer is simply to save time in post. With single lens clips, you don't need to spend your valuable time for reframing shots, where you would have full control of the composition during recording anyway. Summit Skarfjellet, 1100-ish. And now switch up from skinning mode to skiing mode to downhill mode. Some might say it's not fair to compare retouch footage from the Osmo against non-retouch footage of the X5, and the reason for that is basically two things. One, even with flat color profile, the footage from X5 already has the saturation and black and white levels pushed nearly to their extremes. If anything, it's possible to push the contrast somewhat without overcooking the image. Second reason, the X5 records in 8-bit, which restricts the flexibility of color grading of the image. As mentioned earlier, the Osmo can record in 10-bit and therefore opens up for more color grading options in post. I know this sounds a bit controversial to some, but in my opinion, any users that don't want to bother about color correction and post-processing shouldn't base their choice on the image quality for the 360 shots. However, if you're going to include single lens shots into your videos, then the Osmo scores definitely higher in this area. So as you can see, I'm keeping the Osmo and I sold the X5, and I'll now give you 2 reasons why, and I think the second reason is quite major. So the first reason being is the image quality. I think the image coming out of this camera is slightly better in 360 mode than for the X5. And for single lens mode, I think this camera delivers way better image. The second reason being is that I own those. That means I'm already quite heavily invested into the DJI ecosystem. So the accessories I use mostly for the mounts are mouth bite. The second mount I'm using, so that's the selfie stick coming with the action camera. However, if you lock this in a perfect way, you can also use that for your 360 camera and you won't see the mount at all. I'll make a separate short on that just to confirm that this actually works, okay? The second sub reason when it comes to ecosystem is a DJI mic. I can connect that to the action cameras and I can connect it to the 360 camera as well. Perfect, no more mics needed. Third reason being, and that is batteries. The batteries between the action cameras and the 360 camera are also cross-compatible. So if you're heavily invested into the Insta360 world, I think I'll just stick with the X5 because your life becomes easier. You will save money doing that. When it comes to the reframing process of the 360 shots, I would say that the iPhone app between the Insta360 and the DJI are equally good and equally fast to use. But if you're using the desktop app, I have much better user experience with the Insta360 app than the DJI app. I'm not super interested using lots of time. It just needs to be intuitive and fast and efficient. And for that, I think the Insta360 wins. Another positive point for X5 is that you can replace the lens if you get any scratches. But overall, I'm happy with this camera and I'll stick to that. If you have any questions, any comments, please let me know in the comments below. See you in the next one.